bottom of the side and back panels into which the fixed shelf will fit. Okay, I'm going to dry assemble a couple of the pieces of the cabinet to show you a detail here. Now, all the edges of the veneer plywood that show, I'm going to cover with this thin birch veneer. I'm going to put a piece here, and I'm actually going to put a piece here to cover up the dado that I don't want to see. But I'm afraid that if I don't fill that dado, this veneer is too thin and not strong enough. So I'm going to fill the void with some little pine fillers and just use some hot glue to hold them in place. Well, now it's time to put some veneer on the edges that are going to show. And I've used a couple different methods over the years. One is to just buy regular veneer and apply contact cement to the edge of the panel and to the back of the veneer and just glue it on and trim it off. A few years ago, they started coming out with veneer that already had glue on the back side, and it was activated by heat. So you could just lay it over the edge, take an ordinary household iron, and just iron it on. The latest thing is this edge banding tool. And these really came about due to the fact that shops would want to produce a lot of cabinets and edges at one time. Just a roll of veneer and this little heat gun, which blows hot air onto the glue surface, heats it up so that it gets melted, and you bring out the wood onto the roller and just roll it along the edge. It works great. Now you want to make sure you keep even pressure against the roller and you move at the same rate of speed. That takes a little practice because if you go too fast, it won't stick right, and if you go too slow, it'll overheat. Now, when you get about 2.5 inches from the end, you just strike this tool right here, which is just a cutter, and it shears off the veneer. You finish it off. Okay, now I'm ready to trim the veneer. And you'll notice that the veneer is a little wider than the panel, and that's really just to give you a little bit of a fudge factor so you can get it nice and even. Now, I found that the best way to trim this veneer is to use a router. And I've equipped my router with a straight cutting bit with a little ball bearing which guides along the side of the piece. Now, the standard procedure for using a router is to move it against the rotation of the bit. And really, that's primarily for safety. But when you're trying to trim a very thin veneer like this, safety really isn't the factor. It's chipping. And in this case, you want to move the router with the rotation of the bit. Now, to make sure that everything is absolutely even, a quick run over the edge with the sander, and that takes care of it. Now I'm ready for a little assembly, a little bit of glue in the dados. And then when you're working with veneer plywood, it's also a good idea to put a little bit of glue right on the edge of the panel that's going to fit into the dado, because the veneer tends to absorb the glue quickly. I'm going to pre-drill for a screw. All right. Now I counterbored the hole a little bit. I'm going to plug that with a little plug later. Now I'll just use an 1¼ inch screw. Pull it all together. Now this top rail gets held in place with a little bit of glue and some 4-penny nails. Now for the bottom rail, the same thing. Now for the corner blocks, a little bit of glue. They simply get slipped into the dados, and I'll fasten them with some 1-inch brads right down through the top corner. Now this center rail is pine, and that's because you don't really see it. It's hidden behind the draw front and the doors. And I'm using some screws to fasten it because I don't have any corner blocks to give it strength. Now remember those holes I drilled for the screws? Now's the time that I think I'll fill them in. A little bit of glue in the hole itself. I use my brush to get a little to put on the plug. I picked up these birch plugs at my woodworking supply store, and they're tapered a little bit, so when you drive them into the hole, they fit nice and snug. And I'm in no hurry to sand them off quite yet. The casters are held in place with 4 carriage bolts. And I've just started a little bit of a hole by holding the caster in place as a guide, and now I'll finish drilling it through the bottom. Okay, now I'll just put carriage bolt through, give it a tap so it won't spin, and bolt the caster in place. I'm using my belt sander to remove a majority of the dowel that's sticking up above the side of the cabinet. Then I'll sand everything smooth with my finishing sander. I want to show you the parts that I've been cutting for the drawer. This is for the back. These 2 pieces are the sides, and this large piece is for the bottom. And they're all 1/2-inch AC plywood. Now, clamped in the bench vise is another piece of birch for the drawer front that I've edged. And I'm getting ready to cut a dovetail joint. I'll show you what I mean. This is a different method of joining a drawer front to a side. It's a sliding dovetail. The side slides in through the joint, really making it secure. Now, to cut that joint, the first thing that I have to do is lay out the center of the dovetail cut. And I also put an indicator mark here. I don't want to go all the way through and show the dovetail at the top of the drawer. Over here is a layout line, an offset, that I'm going to set this clamp on and use it as a guide for my router. Now, the router is set up with a 1/2-inch dovetailing bit. And the key here is to hold the router tight to the back of the drawer front and against the guide. Move it slowly in, watching through the base of the router, and stopping right at that indicator mark. And I've got to be careful, because if I pull the router out while it's running, I'm going to ruin the joint, because it's tapered. The bit is tapered. I just want to move it in slowly, shut it off, and push it back out again. I'm going to need your prayers. I've installed the same router bit that I cut the socket with in my router table. And by carefully adjusting the rip fence, I've made this sample to see how it's going to fit. Let's check it out. Just snug. That's what I want. Now I can run the sides through. Back here at the table saw, I've re-installed my stacked dado head cutter, and I've set it up for a 1/2 inch in width and made a groove along the back edge of the side where the back will fit into it. Well, that takes care of the groove for the bottom of the drawer to fit into. Now, to make the groove in the drawer front, which is going to receive the bottom, I can't do it on my table saw because it'll show through the ends. But I can use my portable router, which I've equipped with a 1/2 inch straight bit and a guide fence. I'm just going to drop it in near one of the dovetail sockets and run to the other one. The drawer goes together with a little bit of carpenter's glue. Let me just slide this joint together. And if it needs a little help at the end, a block of wood and a hammer will do the job. The back of the drawer gets glued and nailed into place. Now the bottom of the drawer, which is not glued to the sides and front, just nailed along the back. Installing the drawer slides is just a matter of following the manufacturer's instructions. Some screws into the drawer side and some into the case. And let's see how it fits. Slip it together. Good. Now let's put the doors on. Now the doors, more edge-banded plywood, need two 35mm diameter holes for the hinges. Now for the hardware itself. The manufacturer of the hinge will sell you this little template, which makes it easier to locate the hinge on the case. That's all there is to that. Installing the doors is a snap. The top of the cabinet is made from 3/4-inch high-density particle board. There's 2x4s around the bottom edge to give it some thickness, and it's all banded in oak. I've already cut the particle board to size and the 2x4s that go underneath it. And I'm just going to use a little bit of glue and some screws to fasten the 2x. Now the oak banding that goes around the countertop is mitered at the corners, and that's best done here at my power miter box, which I've set at 45 degrees. I like to secure the oak band to the counter blank with a little bit of glue. What I'm going to do first is nail the corners together with some brads, and then I'll secure the rest of the band with some screws. The high-pressure laminate for the top is applied to the substrate using a contact cement. We'll put a little bit out on the piece, roll it on each piece, and when it's dry, we'll carefully attach them together. Now see, that's just dry. Now you only get one shot at this. This is contact cement. Once it touches, that's it. So I've cut the piece a little oversized. Get it lined up on the edge here and drop it down. Now I'm just going to take this J roller and bond the two surfaces together. I'm using the same router bit that I trimmed the wood veneer with a little bit earlier. One final detail for the top. You'll notice that I chamfered the edges all the way around. And to do that, I just set my router up with a chamfering bit. I'm going to secure the top to the base with 4 2-inch screws through those corner blocks we put in earlier. These cleats will hold the hardware for the sliding shelf. Okay, now we can build the tray. Using the table saw, I've made this rabbet, which will receive the bottom of the tray. Just as with the edges on the countertop, I've mitered all the corners over at the power miter box, and now I'm attaching the edges with glue and some 1-inch brads. Now, before I install the shelf, I think I'll give everything a coat of sanding sealer. This is a water-based sanding sealer. And it's a good choice for a first coat because it'll seal the pores in both the hardwood and the softwood. I'm going to coat everything inside and out. It should dry in about 30 minutes or so. Then I'll take a look at it, and maybe I'll put one more final coat of a good hard polyurethane to really protect it. Ever since I built this shop cabinet several months ago, I kicked myself for not having done it sooner. It's an indispensable item in the workshop.